The smell of bleach clung to my skin like a desperate lover. No matter how many times I scrubbed my hands, that chemical scent followed me home every night. A reminder of the life I couldn't escape. My fingers were cracked and red, betraying my occupation to anyone who bothered to look. Not that anyone ever did. I adjusted the threadbare strap of my bag as I hurried across the hotel's massive underground parking garage, my footsteps echoing in the concrete cavern. 6 hours of scrubbing bathrooms and changing sheets at the Valentia Grand Hotel had left me with an aching back and feet that screamed with each step. But I couldn't afford to slow down. Ms. Reynolds, the head of housekeeping, had warned me 3 times already about clocking out late. "One more tardy, Ellis, and you're done," she'd said, her penciled eyebrows arched with the satisfaction of someone who enjoyed wielding what little power she had. I checked my watch, a cheap plastic thing with a cracked face that had belonged to my mother. 3:57 p.m., 3 minutes to get upstairs and clock out. I quickened my pace, my non-slip shoes squeaking against the polished concrete. That's when I heard it. The purr of an engine that sounded like it cost more than what I'd make in 10 years. The sound echoed through the garage, bouncing off the walls in a way that made it impossible to tell which direction it was coming from. I pressed myself against a concrete pillar, not wanting to be in anyone's way. In a place like the Valentia, people who drove cars that sounded like that didn't stop for maids. The black SUV rounded the corner, moving with a predatory grace that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. It glided to a stop about 20 feet from where I stood, the windows tinted so dark they looked like portals into another dimension. I noticed there were no license plates. The rear door opened, and I caught a glimpse of a polished leather shoe before ducking my head down. I'd learned early on at the Valentia that the wealthy guests preferred staff to be invisible. We were supposed to clean their messes and disappear, like magic little worker bees that never made eye contact or had the audacity to exist in their presence. I was so focused on becoming one with the pillar that I didn't notice the paper that slipped from my bag. The final notice from New England Medical Center. The one threatening to send my father's medical bills to collections if I didn't make a payment by the end of the week. A gust of wind from the garage entrance sent the paper skittering across the concrete, directly into the path of the black SUV. My heart stopped. I lunged forward without thinking, desperate to grab it before it disappeared under the vehicle, or worse, was seen by whoever was exiting the car. My fingers had just closed around the edge of the paper when a different hand came down on mine. A man's hand. Large, with a gold signet ring on the pinky finger, the skin olive-toned and warm against my perpetually cold fingers. Time seemed to stop as I followed the hand up to a crisp white cuff, secured with what looked like actual gold cufflinks, then up a tailored sleeve to broad shoulders, encased in a suit that probably cost more than my rent for a year, and finally, to a face that made my breath catch in my throat. Dark eyes studied me with an intensity that made me want to shrink into myself. They weren't just brown, they were nearly black, framed by thick lashes any woman would envy. His face was all sharp angles, cheekbones that could cut glass, a strong jaw darkened with precisely maintained stubble, and lips pressed into a thin line. His hair was ink black, swept back from his forehead with just a single rebellious strand falling across his brow. But it wasn't his devastating good looks that made my stomach twist into knots. It was the absolute stillness about him. He held himself like a predator, assessing whether I was prey worth pursuing or too insignificant to bother with. I'm sorry, I stammered, trying to pull my hand away, but his grip tightened ever so slightly. His gaze flickered to the paper beneath our hands, and I watched as those dark eyes scanned the medical bill. My cheeks burned with humiliation. $24,000 in debt displayed for a complete stranger to see. And not just any stranger, but one who probably spent that much on a watch. "Please," I whispered, giving another tug on the paper. "I need to go." He released both my hand and the bill so suddenly I nearly toppled backward. I clutched the paper to my chest, crumpling it in my desperation to hide my shame. "You work here." It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, accented with something I couldn't quite place. Mediterranean, maybe, with a hint of something else. Each word was precisely enunciated, as if he'd learned English through classical training rather than casual conversation. "Yes, sir." I kept my eyes fixed on the concrete floor, counting the seconds until I could escape. 3:59 p.m. 1 minute to clock out. I was going to be late. Look at me. D. The command was so unexpected that I found myself obeying before my brain could catch up. My eyes snapped to his, and I felt a jolt like an electric current pass between us. A faint smile played at the corner of his mouth. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "What's your name?" "Ellis," I said automatically, then mentally kicked myself. We were supposed to give only last names to guests. "Ellis Matthews." He nodded once, as if filing the information away. "Ellis," he repeated, and something about the way my name sounded in his accent made my skin prickle. "You should be more careful with your personal documents." Before I could respond, a second man emerged from the SUV. He was broader, with a neck like a bull, and eyes that swept the garage in constant vigilance. He said something in a language I didn't understand. It sounded like Italian, but harsher somehow. The man in front of me replied without looking away from my face, and I noticed how the second man immediately straightened, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to something like deference. "You're late for something," the dark-eyed man said to me, again not a question but a statement of fact. "Yes, sir. I need to clock out." He reached into his suit jacket, and I flinched involuntarily. He paused, those obsidian eyes narrowing slightly at my reaction before continuing the motion more slowly. He withdrew a sleek leather wallet and extracted a business card, black with silver embossing that caught the fluorescent light. "Take it," he said when I hesitated. I accepted the card with trembling fingers. "Alessandro Russo," I read aloud before I could stop myself. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that I had dared to speak his name. "Call this number when you're finished with your shift tomorrow. I have a proposition for you." A chill ran down my spine. I'd heard stories about wealthy men making propositions to female staff. The Valentia had strict policies against fraternization with guests, but everyone knew it happened. I'd managed to avoid that particular pitfall in my 6 months of employment, keeping my head down and my interaction with guests to a minimum. I don't think," I began, but he cut me off with a raised hand. "It's a job offer, Miss Matthews. One that would help with that." He nodded toward the crumpled bill still clutched in my hand. "Nothing inappropriate. I need someone with discretion and attention to detail to manage my residence while I'm in Boston." I blinked at him, certain I'd misheard. "Your residence?" "I own the penthouse. The agency the hotel uses sent incompetent staff. I prefer to choose my own employees." His tone suggested this was a perfectly reasonable explanation for accosting a maid in a parking garage. The second man cleared his throat pointedly, and Alessandro Russo checked his watch, a timepiece that confirmed my earlier assessment about what these people spent on accessories. "Tomorrow, Miss Matthews, 5 o'clock. He turned and walked toward the elevator bank, the second man falling into step beside him, speaking rapidly in that same harsh language. I stood frozen, the business card burning between my fingers like a hot coal. It wasn't until they disappeared into the elevator that I remembered to breathe and to check my watch. 4:06 p.m. I was late. I sprinted to the staff elevator, jabbing the button repeatedly as if that would make it arrive faster. My mind raced faster than my feet. Ms. Reynolds would fire me for sure this time. And then what? The rent was due in 2 weeks. Dad's medical bills were piling up, and the medication he needed wasn't covered by the pitiful insurance I'd managed to get him. The elevator doors opened, and I collided with a solid chest. Strong hands gripped my shoulders to steady me, and I looked up into the impassive face of the man who'd been with Alessandro Russo. "Mr. Russo forgot to mention," he said, his accent much heavier than his boss's. "The position pays $5,000 a week." My jaw dropped. That was more than I made in 2 months at the Valentia. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Russo doesn't make mistakes." He released my shoulders and stepped around me. 5 o'clock tomorrow. Don't be late." The elevator doors closed behind me, and I sagged against the wall, my knees suddenly weak. $5,000 a week. It would clear Dad's medical debt in a month. We could move out of our crumbling apartment, get him the specialist he needed. Maybe even... The display above the elevator showed it descending to the basement level where staff clocked in and out. Reality crashed back like a bucket of ice water. I was still late, still about to be fired, still holding nothing but a business card and an impossible promise. As the elevator doors opened onto the dingy staff corridor, I made a decision. I would call the number. What choice did I have, really? Whatever Alessandro Russo wanted, whatever discretion and attention to detail meant in his world, it couldn't be worse than watching my father waste away because I couldn't afford to help him. Could it? Ms. Reynolds was waiting by the time clock, her thin lips stretched into a triumphant smile. Well, well, Ms. Matthews, what did I tell you about being late? I clutched the black business card tighter in my palm, feeling the embossed letters press into my skin. I quit, I said, surprising both of us. I walked out of the Valentia Grand Hotel with nothing but uncertainty ahead of me and the weight of a stranger's expectations pressing down on my shoulders. As I stepped onto the busy Boston street, a black SUV with tinted windows crawled past, slow enough that I knew it was watching me. I didn't need to see through the glass to know who was inside. Somehow, Alessandro Russo had already changed the course of my life, and I didn't even know if that was a good thing. I only knew I didn't have a choice anymore. I spent that night researching Alessandro Russo online, my ancient laptop wheezing with each new search. I found surprisingly little for someone who clearly had money to throw around. A few mentions in business journals about property acquisitions in Boston, New York, and Miami. A single photo from a charity gala 3 years ago, where he stood stone-faced beside a woman in a red dress whose smile seemed strained. No social media presence. No scandals. It was as if he deliberately maintained a low profile, which only made my anxiety worse. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" my best friend Mia asked over the phone, as I scrolled through yet another vague article that mentioned Russo Enterprises, without any specifics about what the company actually did. $5,000 a week, Mia, I replied, watching my father sleep in the recliner we'd set up in the living room because he couldn't manage the stairs to his bedroom anymore. "That's life-changing money, or life-ending," she muttered. "Nobody offers that kind of money without expecting something in return, and I don't mean dusting his bookshelves." I sighed, closing my laptop. "I know it sounds crazy, but you didn't see him, Mia. He wasn't like that." He was intimidating, sure, but not in a creepy way. "Ellis, honey, you're not exactly an expert on men. Your last boyfriend was Kevin from community college, who thought showering twice a week was ambitious." I laughed despite myself. Low blow. "I'm just saying, be careful. Meet this guy somewhere public tomorrow. Text me his information and your location. And for God's sake, take your pepper spray." After promising Mia I wouldn't end up as a headline on the evening news, I tried to get some sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Alessandro Russo's penetrating gaze, felt the warmth of his hand on mine, heard the precise way he'd pronounced my name. Morning came too quickly. I spent the day caring for Dad, making his meals, helping him with his physical therapy exercises, and trying not to think about what 5 o'clock would bring. As the hour approached, I changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple blue dress that was the nicest thing I owned, though it was years out of style and slightly too big after months of skipping meals to make ends meet. "You look pretty," Dad said from his recliner, his voice raspy from the medications that were supposed to be helping his pulmonary fibrosis but seemed to only make him weaker. "Got a date?" I forced a smile. "Job interview, actually. I quit the hotel yesterday." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Thought you needed that job." "Something better came up," I said, kissing his forehead. "Don't wait up, okay? Mrs. Petrov from next door will check on you at 8. At 4:45, I stood on the sidewalk outside our apartment building, the business card clutched in my sweaty palm. I took a deep breath and dialed the number. It rang only once before a man's voice answered. Not Alessandro, but the second man from the garage. "Address," was all he said. I gave him our address, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "Wait outside. 5 minutes." The call ended. True to his word, exactly 5 minutes later, the same black SUV from yesterday pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, But it wasn't Alessandro inside, just the broad-shouldered man from before. "Get in," he said, not unkindly. I hesitated, Mia's warnings echoing in my ears. "I thought I was meeting Mr. Russo." "You are, at his residence." He saw my hesitation and sighed. "My name is Vito. I've worked for Mr. Russo for 15 years. He sent me to collect you because he's in a meeting. You're safe." Something about the matter-of-fact way he said it made me believe him. I sent Mia a quick text with Vito's name and description, then climbed into the SUV. The interior was luxurious, all butter-soft black leather and polished wood. Vito sat across from me, leaving the middle seat empty. As we pulled away from the curb, I noticed another identical SUV falling into place behind us. "Is that with us?" I asked, pointing back. Vito nodded. "Security." "Does Mr. Russo always travel with this much protection?" Vito's expression remained impassive. "Always." We drove in silence after that, heading into the heart of Boston and then toward the waterfront. When we pulled up to a gleaming glass and steel tower overlooking the harbor, my stomach tightened. The Archer Building was infamous, the most expensive residential property in the city, with units starting at $15 million. "This is where Mr. Russo lives?" I asked, unable to keep the awe from my voice. "One of his residences," Vito replied, as if this were entirely normal. We bypassed the main lobby, instead driving into a private entrance where 2 men in suits stood guard. They nodded to Vito as we passed. The elevator we entered had no buttons, just a keypad where Vito entered a code and pressed his thumb to a scanner. "Top floor," he explained, as the elevator began its ascent. The entire top 3 floors, actually. My head spun. Who needed 3 floors of living space? The elevator opened directly into a foyer with soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. The space was immaculate, minimalist in design with white walls, dark hardwood floors, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Mr. Russo will join you shortly," Vito said, gesturing to a seating area. "Would you like something to drink?" "Just water, thank you," I replied, too overwhelmed to ask for anything else. Vito disappeared, leaving me alone in the vast space. I perched on the edge of a white leather sofa that probably cost more than my entire apartment building, afraid to sink too deeply into it. Minutes ticked by, and I became increasingly aware of how out of place I was. My simple dress, my scuffed shoes, my drugstore makeup. Everything about me screamed that I didn't belong in a place like this. I heard him before I saw him, the confident stride, the subtle authority in each footstep. Alessandro Russo entered the room, not from the elevator, but from a hallway to the left, dressed in another impeccable suit, this one a deep navy that made his olive skin glow in the late afternoon light. He wasn't alone. A man in a gray suit walked beside him, speaking rapidly in Italian. Alessandro responded without looking at the man, his eyes finding me immediately across the vast space. He said something curt to his companion, who nodded and retreated down the hallway they'd come from. Then Alessandro was walking toward me, and I found myself standing up, as if pulled to my feet by some invisible force. "Miss Matthews," he said, his voice sending the same unexpected thrill through me as it had yesterday. "I'm pleased you called." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Russo," I replied, proud that my voice didn't quaver. He gestured for me to sit again, then took a seat across from me. Vito appeared with a glass of water for me, and what looked like whiskey for Alessandro, then disappeared again with that same silent efficiency. "I'll be direct," Alessandro said, not touching his drink. "I require a personal assistant who will manage my residence and handle certain private matters. The previous person was unsatisfactory." Something about the way he said unsatisfactory made me wonder what had happened to them. "I don't have experience as a personal assistant," I admitted. "I've only worked as a hotel maid, and before that, as a waitress." A slight smile curved his lips. "I'm not interested in experience. I'm interested in intelligence, discretion, and loyalty. You appear to possess at least the first 2 qualities. The third remains to be seen." I fought the urge to squirm under his intense gaze. "May I ask what specific duties would be involved?" "Managing the household staff, coordinating my schedule when I'm in Boston, handling personal errands and correspondence." Ensuring my privacy is maintained at all times. He leaned forward slightly. Nothing illegal, Miss Matthews, if that's your concern. It had been, though I hadn't wanted to ask so directly. The position pays $5,000 weekly, as Vito informed you. You would be on call 24 hours a day, though you would not always be required to be on the premises. You would have your own suite here for when late nights or early mornings make commuting impractical. My mind reeled at the implications. My own suite in this palace? And my father? He's ill. I care for him. Something flickered in Alessandro's eyes. A softening, perhaps, though it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Arrangements can be made, private nursing care if necessary. I swallowed hard, fighting back sudden tears. Private nursing care was something we'd never been able to afford, something that would make Dad's life immeasurably better. Why me? I finally asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since yesterday. You don't know anything about me. Alessandro set his untouched drink aside and stood, walking to the window. The setting sun cast him in silhouette, his powerful frame outlined in gold and crimson. I know more than you think, Ellis Matthews. 24 years old. Born and raised in South Boston. Mother deceased. Father with pulmonary fibrosis exacerbated by years working construction without proper respiratory protection. Community college dropout to care for him when he became too ill to work. No criminal record. No significant romantic attachments. Responsible for a medical debt that will take you approximately 15 years to pay off at your current income. My blood ran cold. How could he possibly know all that? I'd only met him yesterday. He turned from the window, his expression unreadable. I make it my business to know who I invite into my life, Miss Matthews, even temporarily. The question isn't why you, but why not you? You need money desperately. I need someone who understands the value of what I'm offering and won't take it for granted. So I'm just convenient? The words slipped out before I could stop them. For the first time, I saw genuine amusement in his dark eyes. There is nothing convenient about you, Ellis Matthews. The way he said my full name, like he was savoring each syllable, made heat rise to my cheeks. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened, and a woman strode in as if she owned the place. She was stunningly beautiful, with sleek black hair pulled into a severe ponytail and a red dress that clung to every curve. She stopped short when she saw me, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising in surprise. "Alessandro," she said, her voice laced with a similar accent to his. "I didn't realize you had company." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Alessandro's posture stiffened, the momentary warmth I'd glimpsed vanishing completely. "Valentina," he replied coldly. "I wasn't expecting you, clearly." Her eyes raked over me dismissively before returning to Alessandro. "We need to talk. Alone." "Miss Matthews and I are in the middle of an interview," Alessandro said, his tone making it clear he had no intention of cutting our meeting short. Valentina's perfect red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "An interview? For what position exactly?" The insinuation in her tone made my cheeks burn hotter. I began to stand, wanting nothing more than to escape this awkward situation, but Alessandro's sharp glance kept me in my seat. "Personal assistant," he said to Valentina. "Miss Matthews, please excuse us for a moment. Feel free to explore the main living area. Vito will show you around." As if summoned by his name, Vito appeared at my side, gesturing for me to follow him. I stood on shaky legs, hyper-aware of Valentina's scrutiny as I walked past her. Just before we turned the corner, I heard her hiss something in Italian, her voice dripping with disdain. Alessandro's reply was too low for me to catch, but the steel in his tone required no translation. "Don't mind Ms. Ricci," Vito said once we were out of earshot. "She's Mr. Russo's business associate." The hesitation before business associate spoke volumes. Vito showed me through a kitchen that would make a professional chef weep with joy, a dining room with seating for 20, a home gym, a movie theater, and finally, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. "This would be your office," he said, indicating a smaller room adjoining the library. It held a sleek desk with a state-of-the-art computer, a comfortable chair, and more of those breathtaking views of the harbor. "And your suite would be down this hallway, away from Mr. Russo's private quarters. He opened a door to reveal what was less a suite and more a luxury apartment: bedroom, bathroom, sitting area, even a small kitchenette, all decorated in soothing blues and grays, with the same spectacular views as the rest of the penthouse. "This is too much," I whispered, running my fingers along a quilt that looked handmade. "Mr. Russo values comfort," Vito said simply, "both his own and that of the people who work for him." I turned to face him. "Vito, can I ask you something honestly?" He nodded, his expression neutral. "What is he really like? To work for, I mean?" Vito considered the question for a moment. "Demanding, particular, sometimes difficult." Then, with what might have been the ghost of a smile, but always fair, "He rewards loyalty generously and never forgets a debt, either one owed to him or one he owes to others." Something in his tone made me think there was a personal story behind those words. Before I could ask, the door to the suite opened, and Alessandro stood there, filling the doorframe with his presence. "I see Vito has shown you your accommodations," he said, his eyes sweeping the room before settling on me. "Are they satisfactory?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. Satisfactory? It was a palace compared to the cramped one-bedroom apartment I shared with my father. "It's beautiful," I said honestly. He nodded, as if my approval was expected, but still appreciated. "Valentina has left. We can continue our discussion over dinner, if you're available." It wasn't really a question, but I found I didn't mind. "I should check on my father first." "Of course. Vito will arrange for a car to take you home to see to your father and then bring you back. 7 o'clock? I nodded, suddenly realizing how hungry I was. In the chaos of the day, I'd forgotten to eat. As Vito led me back to the elevator, I felt Alessandro's eyes on me the whole way, watching, assessing. I had the distinct impression I was being tested, though I wasn't sure what the right answers were. The car dropped me at my apartment building with the promise to return in 45 minutes. I rushed up the 3 flights of stairs, my mind still reeling from the opulence I'd just witnessed. Our apartment felt even smaller and shabbier in comparison. The peeling wallpaper, the water stains on the ceiling, the lingering smell of Dad's medication. "There you are," Dad said, looking up from his ancient television. "How'd it go?" I forced a smile, not wanting him to see my conflicted feelings. "Good, I think. It's for a wealthy businessman. Personal assistant position." "Sounds fancy," he said, his breath wheezing slightly with the effort of speaking. "Better than scrubbing toilets, that's for sure." I knelt beside his recliner, taking his hand. His skin was paper-thin now, blue veins visible beneath the surface. My strong, capable father reduced to this fragile shell. "It would mean changes, Dad. I might need to stay overnight sometimes. But they're offering to provide private nursing care for you." His eyes widened. "We can't afford—" "It would be part of my compensation," I explained. "And the pay is— It's good, Dad. Really good." He studied my face, his eyes still sharp despite his failing body. "What's the catch?" I hesitated. How could I explain the intimidating presence of Alessandro Russo? Or the way his dark eyes seemed to see right through me, or the unspoken tension I'd felt when that woman Valentina had appeared. "It's demanding," I said finally. "I'd be on call all the time, and the man I'd be working for is intense." Dad squeezed my hand. "You've been taking care of me for years, sacrificing everything. Maybe it's time to think about yourself a little." Tears pricked at my eyes. "This isn't about me, Dad. It's about getting you the care you deserve." "Ellis," he said, his voice firmer than I'd heard it in months, "you're my daughter, not my nurse. I want you to have a life beyond these 4 walls." He reached up to touch my cheek. "Your mother would say the same." I swallowed hard, thinking of Mom. Gone 5 years now from the cancer that had drained our savings before taking her anyway. "I'm meeting him for dinner tonight to discuss the details. I'll be back later." After making sure Dad had everything he needed within reach, I changed into the only other decent outfit I owned, black pants and a white blouse I'd worn for job interviews. I was fixing my hair when my phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Still alive?" I smiled despite myself. "So far. Having dinner with him tonight to discuss details." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Dinner?" Ellis, tell me you're not falling for this guy. Rich men don't hire pretty girls as personal assistants out of charity. I frowned at my phone. Was I pretty? I'd never thought of myself that way. My brown hair was ordinary, my blue eyes my only notable feature. And Alessandro Russo could surely have his pick of beautiful women like Valentina, with her model looks and sophisticated air. It's not like that, I texted back. It's just business. Sure, came the immediate reply. Just remember your pepper spray. The car was waiting when I came downstairs. The drive back to the Archer building felt shorter this time, as if the sleek vehicle was eager to return to its natural habitat among the wealthy and powerful. We entered through the same private entrance, but this time when the elevator doors opened at the top floor, Alessandro himself was waiting. He'd changed from his business suit into more casual attire, though casual for him still meant perfectly tailored black pants and a charcoal gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms dusted with dark hair. The sight of him less formally dressed was somehow more intimidating than the suits. "I hope you like Italian food," he said by way of greeting, leading me not to the formal dining room Vito had shown me earlier, but to a more intimate space, a terrace overlooking the harbor, sheltered from the wind by glass panels. A small table was set with fine china and crystal, candles flickering in the evening breeze. It looked, I realized with a flutter of panic, very much like a date. "I should clarify," Alessandro said, pulling out a chair for me. "This is still a business dinner, but I see no reason why business can't be conducted in a pleasant setting." I sat, relieved and oddly disappointed at the same time. "Italian food sounds wonderful," I said, trying to regain my equilibrium. "I don't get to eat out much." Something that might have been sympathy flickered in his dark eyes. "Vito tells me you care for your father. That must be difficult." "It is. But he's my dad. He took care of me my whole life. Now it's my turn." Alessandro poured wine into my glass, a deep red that caught the candlelight. "Loyalty to family is admirable." A man in a chef's coat appeared with 2 plates of what looked like homemade pasta with seafood. The aroma made my mouth water, reminding me again how long it had been since I'd eaten. "Please," Alessandro said, gesturing to the food. "Don't wait on my account." I took a bite, and couldn't suppress a small moan of pleasure. It was possibly the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. Alessandro watched me with that intense gaze that seemed to miss nothing. "You enjoy simple pleasures, Ellis Matthews. That's rare in my world." The way he said my full name still sent a shiver through me. "I imagine you're surrounded by people who take things like this for granted," I said, gesturing to the exquisite food and breathtaking view. "You have no idea." There was a bitterness in his tone that surprised me. "Tell me what Vito showed you of your potential duties." For the next half hour, we discussed the job in more detail. I would manage his household staff, a cleaner who came 3 times a week, a chef who prepared meals and left them to be heated when required, and the security team that was always present but largely invisible. I would coordinate his schedule when he was in Boston, which was apparently 1 week out of every month. I would handle personal correspondence, gift-giving to business associates, and ensure the residence was always prepared for his arrival, stocked with his preferences. "You would also accompany me to certain social functions," he added, watching my reaction carefully. "Business dinners, charity events, that sort of thing." "As your assistant?" I asked, confused about why he would need me at social events. A slight smile played at his lips. "As whatever role is most convenient at the time." Before I could ask what that cryptic statement meant, he continued, "There's one more thing, Ellis. Perhaps the most important aspect of the job." He set down his fork and fixed me with that penetrating stare. "Discretion. Absolute, unwavering discretion about what you see, what you hear, and who visits my residence." The intensity of his gaze made my skin prickle. "Mr. Russo, what exactly is it that you do?" "Import-export, primarily. Real estate development, some investment banking." His tone was casual, but something in his eyes warned me not to press further. "My business requires a certain level of privacy." A chill ran down my spine as pieces began to fall into place. The excessive security, the untraceable business holdings I'd found online, the way people deferred to him. Alessandro Russo wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in a way that existed in the shadows. "Are you involved in something illegal?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Instead of being offended, he looked almost amused. "Would that change your answer, Ellis?" I thought about my father, about the medical bills, about the 15 years it would take me to pay them off at my current rate. "It would depend on what it was," I said honestly. He studied me for a long moment, then laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed his severe features, making him look younger and almost boyishly charming. "I appreciate your honesty. No, nothing you would be involved with would be illegal. I keep my business and personal lives quite separate." Relief washed over me, though a nagging doubt remained. Then why all the security? The privacy? In my position, one accumulates competitors, people who would use any leverage they could find. His expression darkened, including those close to me. The memory of Valentina's cold stare flashed through my mind. "Is that why you need someone with no significant romantic attachments?" I asked, quoting his earlier assessment of me. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Precisely. Entanglements complicate things. I need someone focused solely on their job. And what about your entanglements?" The wine must have made me bold. "Like Ms. Ricci?" Alessandro's jaw tightened, the only sign that my question had struck a nerve. "Valentina is a business associate, as I'm sure Vito told you. Her father and mine worked together for many years. Our families are connected." Something about the way he said "connected" told me there was far more to the story. Before I could decide whether to press further, he changed the subject. "Tell me about your father's condition. You mentioned medical bills." I blinked at the abrupt shift, but found myself explaining Dad's pulmonary fibrosis, the years of construction work without proper protection, the slow decline of his once robust health. Alessandro listened with an intensity that was becoming familiar, asking occasional questions that showed he was genuinely paying attention. "And the doctors? What do they recommend?" "There's a specialist at Massachusetts General," I said, pushing my half-eaten dessert around my plate. "But he doesn't take our insurance, and there are experimental treatments that might help, but—" I trailed off, the familiar helplessness washing over me. "Write down his name," Alessandro said, pushing a small notebook and pen toward me. "And any other information you have about these treatments." I hesitated. "Why?" "If you accept this position, your father's care becomes my concern as well." He said it matter-of-factly, as if taking responsibility for a dying man he'd never met was the most natural thing in the world. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do that?" Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of an emotion I couldn't name. "Let's just say I understand what it means to care for family above all else." I wrote down Dr. Patel's name, and the information about the stem cell treatment we'd discussed before the doctor realized we could never afford it. When I slid the notebook back, Alessandro's fingers brushed against mine, and that now familiar jolt of awareness shot through me. "So," he said, tucking the notebook into his pocket, "do you accept the position?" I took a deep breath, weighing everything: the money, the luxury, the strange intensity of the man across from me, the unspoken currents I sensed beneath the surface of his world. "Yes," I said finally. "I accept." Something like satisfaction gleamed in his dark eyes. "Excellent. You'll start tomorrow. Vito will have paperwork for you to sign, including a non-disclosure agreement. I'll have a car sent for your belongings." "Tomorrow?" I hadn't expected to start so soon. "I need to arrange care for my father if I'm going to be staying here, already taken care of," he said smoothly. "A private nurse will arrive at your apartment at 9 tomorrow morning. She'll remain with your father whenever you're unable to be there." My jaw dropped. "But how? You didn't even know if I'd accept the job." That slight smile played at his lips again. "I'm not accustomed to hearing no, Ellis." The arrogance of the statement should have annoyed me, but something about the confidence in his voice sent a thrill through me instead. As we finished our meal, Alessandro's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening momentarily before he composed himself. "Excuse me, I need to take this." He stood and moved to the far corner of the terrace, speaking in rapid Italian that sounded tense even to my untrained ear. While he was distracted, I took in the details of him I hadn't allowed myself to notice before. The breadth of his shoulders, the way his shirt stretched across his chest, the elegant strength in his hands as he gestured while speaking. He was undeniably attractive, in that dangerous way that warned sensible women to keep their distance, and I was going to be living under his roof, working directly with him. What had I gotten myself into? When Alessandro returned, his face was once again an impassive mask. "I apologize for the interruption. Business never sleeps, I'm afraid." He glanced at his watch. "It's getting late. Vito will take you home and help arrange whatever you need for tomorrow." "Thank you for dinner," I said, standing, "and for the opportunity." He took my hand, the warmth of his touch sending that same electric current through me. "I think we'll work well together, Ellis Matthews." The way he said it, like a promise and a warning all at once, left me breathless. Vito appeared as if summoned telepathically, ready to escort me downstairs. Before we reached the elevator, I heard Alessandro call my name. I turned to find him watching me with an intensity that made my heart skip. "One last thing," he said. "The dress you're wearing tomorrow night should be black. We're attending an event at the Symphony." I blinked in confusion. I don't own anything suitable for the Symphony. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. "There will be several options delivered to your suite tomorrow. Choose whichever you prefer." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me staring after him with the distinct feeling that my life had just changed irrevocably, and that Alessandro Russo had planned it that way all along. Vito said nothing as we rode the elevator down, but I caught the hint of a knowing look in his eyes. Only when we were in the car did he break his silence. "Mr. Russo rarely takes an interest in new employees," he said, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. "You've made quite an impression." "Is that a good thing?" I asked, uncertain. Vito's expression gave nothing away. "That depends entirely on you, Miss Matthews." As we drove through the nighttime streets of Boston back toward my shabby apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving more than just a job interview behind. I was crossing a threshold into a world I didn't understand, with rules I didn't know, led by a man who seemed to see something in me that I couldn't see myself. Whether that was a blessing or a curse remained to be seen. Morning came with a flurry of activity. True to Alessandro's word, a private nurse arrived at precisely 9, a kind-faced woman in her 50s named Maria, who spoke with a slight Portuguese accent and immediately put my father at ease. She came with equipment I'd never been able to afford: a portable oxygen concentrator that would give Dad more mobility, a specialized recliner that would help with his breathing, and a stack of prescriptions already filled. "Mr. Russo was very specific about your father's care," she explained, as she efficiently organized Dad's medications. "I have your number if anything changes, but don't worry. I raised 5 children and cared for my own parents at the end. Your father is in good hands." Dad watched this transformation of our lives with a mixture of amazement and suspicion. "Ellis, are you sure about this?" he asked when Maria stepped away to take a call. "Feels like we're making a deal with someone we don't really know." I squeezed his hand. "I'm sure about getting you proper care," I said. "The rest, I'll figure it out." By noon, 2 men in suits had arrived to transport my meager belongings to Alessandro's penthouse. I hadn't realized how little I owned until I saw it all packed into just 3 boxes: clothes, toiletries, a few books, and the small wooden box that contained Mom's jewelry. "Is this everything, Miss Matthews?" one of the men asked, looking around our apartment as if expecting to find more. "Yes," I said, embarrassed by the stark evidence of my poverty. "That's it." Saying goodbye to Dad was harder than I expected. Though I'd only be across town and could visit often, it felt symbolic somehow, like I was leaving not just our apartment, but the life we'd known together. "I'm proud of you," Dad said, hugging me weakly. "Your mother would be too. Just be careful, okay? Men with that kind of money, they're used to getting what they want." I swallowed hard, not wanting him to see my own doubts. "I'll call you tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow to check on you." The same black SUV from before was waiting downstairs. This time, it wasn't Vito, but a different security man who held the door for me. As we drove to the Archer building, my phone buzzed with a text from Alessandro himself. Meeting running long. Vito will see you settled. Dress fitting at 2. Be ready at 7. No please. No thank you. Just commands, issued with the confidence of someone who expected to be obeyed. I was beginning to understand that Alessandro Russo operated in a world where his word was law. At the penthouse, Vito met me in the foyer, as unflappable as ever. Welcome, Miss Matthews. Your things have been taken to your suite. Thank you, Vito. I glanced around the vast space, which seemed even more intimidating now that I was supposed to live here. What exactly should I be doing today? Mr. Russo left instructions for you to familiarize yourself with the residence. I've prepared a folder with information about the household staff, security protocols, and Mr. Russo's preferences. He handed me a sleek leather portfolio. At 2, the stylist will arrive with options for tonight's event. At 7, you and Mr. Russo will depart for the Symphony Gala. I followed Vito to what would be my office, taking the folder and trying to look more confident than I felt. What is tonight's event exactly? A charity gala benefiting the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Very formal. Mr. Russo is a major donor. Vito paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. You'll be meeting many of Boston's elite. Mr. Russo's business associates will be present. It would be best to observe more than engage. The warning was clear. Don't embarrass Alessandro by saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. I understand, I said, though I was increasingly uncertain that I did. What role was I supposed to be playing? Assistant? Companion? Arm candy? Vito left me to review the folder's contents, which proved to be meticulously organized. Alessandro's preferences were catalogued with military precision: how he liked his shirts laundered, which brand of coffee he drank, imported from Italy of course, which newspapers should be delivered daily, in both English and Italian, which calls should be put through immediately, and which could wait. I was studying a section on security protocols, surprisingly extensive and stringent, when a soft knock at the door interrupted me. A petite woman with a French accent introduced herself as Celeste, Alessandro's personal stylist, and led me to my suite where several garment bags awaited. Mr. Russo was very specific, she said, unzipping the first bag to reveal a black gown that looked like liquid night. Nothing too revealing, nothing too youthful. Elegant, understated. One by one, she revealed 5 gowns, each more beautiful than the last. All black, as Alessandro had specified, but varying in style from sleek and modern to classically glamorous. I'd never worn anything remotely like them in my life. These can't be for me, I said, touching the delicate beading on one dress with reverent fingers. Celeste smiled knowingly. Mr. Russo insisted these are to be yours, not borrowed, along with appropriate accessories, of course. She opened a velvet box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond pendant and matching earrings. Shall we see which one suits you best? An hour later, I stood before the mirror, barely recognizing myself. The dress we'd chosen was deceptively simple, a floor-length column of black silk with a modest slit that revealed just a hint of leg when I walked. The back dipped lower, exposing my shoulder blades in a way that felt daringly elegant without being inappropriate. With the diamonds at my throat and ears, and my hair swept up in a simple chignon, I looked like someone who belonged in Alessandro's world, at least on the outside. Perfect, Celeste declared. Mr. Russo will be pleased. The thought sent a flutter of something, anxiety, anticipation, through my stomach. I spent the rest of the afternoon memorizing the contents of the folder, trying to absorb every detail of how Alessandro liked his life organized. When 6 o'clock came, I changed into the gown, my hands shaking slightly as I fastened the delicate clasp of the diamond necklace. A makeup artist and hairstylist arrived to put the finishing touches on my transformation, working with quiet efficiency. By 6:50, I stood in the foyer, waiting and trying not to fidget. I heard the elevator doors open and turned to see Alessandro step into the penthouse, still on a call, speaking rapid Italian into his phone. He wore a tuxedo that fit him as if it had been molded to his powerful frame, his dark hair slightly tousled as if he'd been running his hand through it in frustration. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me, his dark eyes widening slightly. For a moment he just stared, and I fought the urge to shrink under the intensity of his gaze. Then he said something curt into the phone and ended the call. "Ellis," he said, his accented voice washing over me. You look appropriate. Coming from anyone else, it would have been an insult. But from Alessandro, with his eyes still taking in every inch of me, it felt like high praise. Thank you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The dress is beautiful. He approached, closing the distance between us with a predatory grace that made my pulse quicken. When he reached me, he circled slowly, examining me from all angles like a collector appraising a new acquisition. I felt my cheeks flush under his scrutiny. The diamonds suit you, he said finally, coming to stand before me again. Simple, elegant, not trying too hard to be something they're not. I wasn't sure if he was still talking about the jewelry or if there was a message for me in his words. Tonight, he continued, you'll be introduced as my personal assistant. You'll stay close, observe, and say as little as possible. If anyone asks about your background, keep it vague. You're new to Boston, recently hired for your organizational skills. Nothing more. Why the secrecy? I asked. It's not like being a personal assistant is suspicious. A shadow passed over his face. In my world, Ellis, people are constantly looking for weaknesses to exploit. New staff, new associates. They're examined for vulnerabilities. The less they know about you, the better. This seemed excessive for an executive, even a wealthy one, but I nodded my agreement. I understand. Good. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. One more thing. He opened it to reveal a slim platinum bracelet set with small diamonds that matched my necklace and earrings. Before I could react, he took my wrist in his hand, that same electricity shooting through me at his touch, and fastened the bracelet himself. His fingers lingered on my pulse point, and I wondered if he could feel how rapidly my heart was beating. This, he said softly, is not just jewelry. If you press here and here simultaneously, he showed me 2 of the diamonds that were positioned opposite each other. It will alert Vito and my security team immediately. Use it if you ever feel uncomfortable or threatened. I stared at the bracelet, then at Alessandro. Why would I need something like this at a symphony gala? His expression turned grim. Because not everyone who smiles at you tonight will be a friend, Ellis. Some will be very dangerous people indeed. With that cryptic warning, he offered me his arm. Shall we? The car ride to Symphony Hall was silent. Alessandro absorbed in his phone while I tried to calm my nerves. When we arrived, the red carpet was lined with photographers and Boston's elite in their finery. Alessandro helped me from the car, his hand warm and steady at the small of my back. Stay close, he murmured in my ear, his breath sending a shiver down my spine. The moment we stepped onto the carpet, a transformation came over him. His usually stern expression softened into a charming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He nodded to acquaintances, shook hands with businessmen, kissed the cheeks of elegant women, all while keeping me tucked against his side, his hand never leaving my back. I was introduced over and over as my new assistant, Ellis Matthews, with no further explanation. Most people barely glanced at me before returning their attention to Alessandro, but a few studied me with calculating eyes that made me grateful for the alert bracelet on my wrist. Inside, the Symphony Hall had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers, floral arrangements, champagne flowing freely. Alessandro navigated the crowd with the ease of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. I observed as instructed, noting how people deferred to him, how conversations paused when he approached, how women's eyes followed him with undisguised interest. Alessandro, a deep voice called, and we turned to see an older man approaching, silver-haired and distinguished in his tuxedo. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Senator Collins, Alessandro replied smoothly, shaking the man's hand. I never miss an opportunity to support the arts. The senator's eyes flicked to me, assessing. And who is this lovely young lady? Ellis Matthews, my new personal assistant, Alessandro said, the same introduction I'd heard a dozen times already. But the senator's eyes narrowed slightly. Matthews. Not related to Jack Matthews from South Boston? My heart skipped a beat. He was talking about my father. Yes, sir, he's my father. Alessandro's hand tightened fractionally at my waist, a silent warning I'd already ignored. Thought so. I'd recognize those eyes anywhere, the senator said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Your father did some work for my campaign years ago. How is he these days? I felt Alessandro's attention sharpen beside me, though his expression remained pleasant. He's been ill, actually, I replied carefully, but doing better now. The senator nodded, something calculating in his gaze. Give him my regards. And Alessandro, he turned his attention back to my employer. We should discuss that waterfront project soon. My office will call yours. Of course, Senator. Alessandro's voice was smooth as silk, but I felt tension in the arm pressed against mine. As the senator moved away, Alessandro steered me toward a quiet corner, his fingers digging slightly into my waist. You didn't mention your father worked in politics, he said, his voice low. He didn't. Not really. He worked construction. He did some renovations on a campaign office once, that's all. I looked up at him, confused by his intensity. I barely remember it. I was a child. Alessandro studied my face for a long moment, as if trying to determine if I was telling the truth. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because his grip relaxed slightly. Let's get a drink, he said finally, guiding me toward the bar. As the evening progressed, I began to notice patterns in Alessandro's interactions. He was charming, but reserved with most people, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. With certain men, older, powerful-looking types, he was more deferential, though it seemed to cost him something to be so. And whenever Valentina Ricci appeared across the room, his entire body would tense, though his face revealed nothing. She was there with another man, silver-haired and distinguished, probably in his 60s. They made a striking couple, her youth and beauty a stark contrast to his age and gravitas. Whenever they came near us, Alessandro would steer me in another direction, avoiding direct contact. Who is that man with Ms. Ricci? I finally asked during a quiet moment. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Marco Ricci. Her father. A business associate. The way he said business associate made me think it was a significant understatement. Before I could ask anything else, Valentina herself appeared before us, her red dress ensuring she was the center of attention wherever she went. Alessandro, she purred, leaning in to kiss his cheek. Her eyes flicked to me with thinly veiled disdain. And your assistant. How quaint. Valentina, Alessandro replied, his tone cool but polite. You look lovely as always. She preened at the compliment. Father's been looking for you all evening. He's not pleased about the Chicago situation. Something dangerous flashed in Alessandro's eyes. This isn't the place, Valentina, she smiled, cat-like. Of course not. Just delivering the message. Her attention shifted to me. Enjoying your first gala, little assistant? It must all be so overwhelming for someone like you. The condescension in her tone made my cheeks burn. Actually, I find it fascinating to observe how desperately some people try to appear important, I replied before I could stop myself. Alessandro made a choking sound that might have been suppressed laughter. Valentina's eyes widened in shock before narrowing dangerously. You should teach your pet better manners, Alessandro, she hissed. And you should remember that you're speaking to someone under my protection, he replied. All traces of amusement gone, a courtesy I can easily withdraw from you as well. The threat hung in the air between them. Valentina's face paled slightly before she recovered her composure. Father expects you for dinner tomorrow night. Don't be late. With that, she stalked away, her red dress aflame cutting through the crowd. Alessandro's hand at my waist guided me in the opposite direction. That was unwise, he murmured, though I detected a note of approval in his voice. She was incredibly rude, I said, still bristling. Yes, she was. But Valentina Ricci is not someone you want as an enemy, Ellis. Is she your girlfriend? The question burst out before I could reconsider. Alessandro looked genuinely startled, then grimaced. No, never. Our families have expectations, but no. Valentina and I have a complicated history, but not that. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by confusion about why I should feel relieved at all. Alessandro Russo was my employer, nothing more. His romantic entanglements were none of my business. As the evening wore on, I began to notice another pattern. How many people seemed afraid of Alessandro, not overtly, but in subtle ways. Conversations that hushed when we approached, nervous laughs when he made mild jokes, the careful way people phrased their questions to him. It was as if everyone was walking on eggshells, afraid of causing offense. By 11, I was exhausted from the tension of navigating this unfamiliar social terrain. Alessandro must have noticed, because he leaned down to murmur in my ear, 10 more minutes, then we'll leave. His breath against my skin sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. True to his word, minutes later he was making our excuses to our hosts and guiding me back to the waiting car. Once inside, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "You did well tonight," Alessandro said, surprising me. "Better than I expected. Except for snapping at Valentina," I said with a wry smile. The corner of his mouth lifted. That was unexpected, but not entirely undeserved. We rode in comfortable silence for a few minutes, before I gathered the courage to ask the question that had been burning in my mind all evening. "Alessandro, who are you really? Everyone tonight seemed afraid of you." His expression shuddered, the momentary warmth disappearing. "I told you. Import-export, real estate, banking." "No," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "It's more than that. The security, the way people treat you, the warnings about danger. You're not just a businessman." He turned to look out the window, his profile sharp against the city lights streaming past. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. "My father," he finally said, his voice low, "came to this country with nothing. He built something substantial. When he died, I inherited both his business and his enemies." He turned back to me, his dark eyes unreadable. "Does that satisfy your curiosity, Ellis?" It didn't. Not remotely, but I recognized the warning in his tone. "For now," I said quietly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You're braver than you look." When we returned to the penthouse, I expected Alessandro to retreat to his private quarters as he had the night before. Instead, he loosened his bow tie and nodded toward the terrace. "Nightcap?" he offered. "I think we've both earned it." I followed him outside, where the night air was cool but not unpleasant. The city sparkled below us, a carpet of lights stretching to the dark line of the harbor. Alessandro poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and handed one to me. "To a successful first day," he said, raising his glass slightly. I took a sip and nearly coughed as the liquor burned its way down my throat. Alessandro's lips twitched in amusement. "Not a whiskey drinker?" "Not really," I admitted, though I took another small sip, rather than appear ungrateful. He leaned against the glass railing, studying me with those intense dark eyes. "Tell me something true about yourself, Ellis Matthews, something that wasn't in the file." I considered the strange request. "I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was young," I said finally. "I was obsessed with the ocean. My mom used to take me to the aquarium every month." "And now?" I shrugged, looking out at the distant harbor. "Now I just try to keep my head above water." He nodded, as if my answer confirmed something for him. "Dreams are luxuries not everyone can afford." "What about you?" I asked. "What did you want to be before this?" I gestured vaguely at the penthouse, the wealth, whatever empire he controlled. A shadow crossed his face. "There was never a before this for me, Ellis. My path was determined from birth." Something in his tone, a hint of old resentment perhaps, made me bold enough to push further. "You never wanted anything else?" Alessandro took a long sip of his whiskey, his eyes fixed on the city below. "Once," he said so quietly I almost didn't hear him, "I thought I might study architecture, design beautiful spaces instead of just owning them." He shook his head slightly. "A childish fantasy." I could picture it suddenly. A younger Alessandro with drawing tools instead of smartphones and security details, creating instead of commanding. "It doesn't sound childish to me," I said softly. His eyes met mine, something vulnerable flickering in their depths before being quickly shuttered away. The world I live in doesn't allow for such indulgences. We fell silent. The sounds of the city rising up around us like distant waves. I found myself studying his profile. The strong jaw, the straight nose, the tension he carried in his shoulders even now, when he was supposedly relaxed. "You should get some rest," he said finally, finishing his drink. "Tomorrow will be a long day. I'll be in meetings until the afternoon, but Vito will show you what needs to be done." "Thank you," I said, setting down my barely touched whiskey. "For everything. The clothes, my father's nurse. It's more than I expected." Alessandro turned to face me fully. "I take care of what's mine, Ellis," he said, his voice low and intense. "Remember that." A shiver that had nothing to do with the night air ran through me. The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed me, but instead, it sent a thrill of something dangerous and exciting through my veins. "Good night, Alessandro," I said, moving toward the door before I could do something foolish, like step closer to him instead of away. "Good night, Ellis Matthews," he replied, my full name on his lips still sending that same strange flutter through me. In my suite, I carefully removed the diamond jewelry and the beautiful gown, hanging it reverently in the closet that was now filled with clothes I'd never picked out, but that somehow were exactly my size and style. As I slipped into bed between sheets softer than anything I'd ever felt, I tried to make sense of the day, of my new life, of Alessandro Russo, and the world he inhabited. One thing was becoming increasingly clear. I was being drawn into something much more complex and potentially dangerous than a simple employment arrangement. The question was whether I had the strength and the wisdom to navigate it without losing myself completely. As I drifted toward sleep, Alessandro's words echoed in my mind. "I take care of what's mine." The implication was both reassuring and terrifying, because somehow in just 2 days, I had become his.